playfully interact with them, but also the combination of games and real life and your social connections. For these sessions, we have two speakers, Oriel Bergig from Ogmento. He's a co-founder of Ogmento and Vice President of Research and Development. And Tatsumo Horikawa from Sony, who has worked on the PS2, PS3, and is now leading the computer vision project. I would like to tell something, since we are talking about game experiences, about the possibilities of augmented reality, or the broad range of augmented reality as I see, to basically stimulate different senses other than just vision, to deconstruct them, focus on different aspects, and enhance those senses. As game designers, we are also kind of asked to provoke emotions to the players, and we have this kind of traditional game emotions like Fiero, the sense of triumph after a hard challenge, after a phase of frustrations and excitement. But there are, of course, other kind of emotions we can evoke through games, through new technologies like AR. Let it be curiosity when you're going around in your world and exploring new places, but also emotions which are more related to arts at the moment, like sadness. Some kind of examples I have for apps which are using augmented reality in a broad range is kind of enhancing your sound environment. It's an app called Dimensions, which you can carry around, and it's detecting your kinetic movements, but also your sound environment, and add filter to it so that it's creating some kind of soundtrack of your life based on what you are doing. So you are going around and you are knocking on the wood or experiencing crisping things down, and it creates some kind of soundtrack, and it makes your life more exciting, or the space between you. But also this shift of perspective is something we as game designers are trying to do. If you're playing traditional games, you are put in a position of a superhero, or you are put in a position of I don't know, if it's more a serious game, you are put in a position of something who's played as a soldier in the Second World War, or things like that. And we had some kind of example yesterday, Jason Wilson's outer body experience, in which you were kind of seeing yourself from the third-person perspective. And that's also one possibility of the broad range of augmented reality, not the traditional sense of that. What I also kind of see is this possibility of collaborative exploration of your area, of your locations, but also collaborative art. So yesterday we had also some kind of examples where artists were putting some kind of plane over buildings and putting art pieces there. But what about if we extend that and everybody could actually collaborate and make graffiti, make abstract art on pieces on the wall? But that's for me, and we now start with Oriel.
Thank you. So, as we wait for the presenter to come up, I'll just tell you a little bit about what I wanted to share with you today, which is practically, I've been a couple of years, 6, 7 years in this space of augmented reality. You know, I'm coming here for this conference and others, ISMAR before. So, you know, meet the same people every time. I see new faces, so that's great. And all this time, I always had that feeling that, you know, every year I kind of think, okay, so this year it's coming. The killer AR application is coming. It could be a game, it could be something else, it doesn't matter. It's going to come in this year. You know, I'm going to walk in the street and I'll be able to, you know, talk with people about an application, like I talk about Angry Birds, like I talk about Facebook, and they're going to go like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And it doesn't happen, you know, a year again. And Bruno from Total Immersion CEO, one of the first companies that started augmented reality in a sense commercially, they've been in the space 10 years, and he said in his presentation yesterday, we should stop talking about the future of AR. Let's talk about today. And that's practically, what I've been thinking about in the last 2 years, I would say, where, since I founded Ogmento, we can do it now, and we've got the mandate, we've got the technology, we've got everything we need to actually make it happen, to make a killer augmented reality experience or game or something that everybody knows about happen now. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, and then eventually pose the challenge as well. So that's kind of, I just kind of laid out everything I wanted to kind of high level of what I wanted to discuss with you today, guys, but really seriously, think about it. Let me ask you a question, like who has been in the space of AR, looking on AR in the last, say, 2 years? Who did that? Okay, so we've got 10 people here that have been in that space for 10 years. How many of you, in general, and specifically those who have been in that space for a year or two, are in the same state of mind that I am right now, which is I'm going to do the killer augmented reality experience now? Here's one entrepreneur. Okay, cool. So this is kind of, we're kind of two in a room of 30 that really want to do it now, and that's part of, I think, why we don't see that coming every. Of course, the chances of us to succeed are limited, but if we were many of us, that would be a very different story. But, and I'll take you through some of the ingredients that I've experienced on what needs to, what makes a good augmented reality experience. But first, I want to kind of go back to where it started with the definition of augmented reality. And when I started working in the space of augmented reality through my PhD, I'm coming from the computer science background. It was for me, when the first definition I had to put on the first slide where I did the presentation about augmented reality, it was the technology of merging the real and the virtual in real time. And I even added more definitions like a Zuma's definition to that, etc. So that was true when I started 7 years ago. And 7 years from now, it's probably going to be the art of merging the real and the virtual in real time. Just like you think about the physics engine right now, you don't think about the technology behind the physics engine. Physics engine is, it's intensive on your game. You need to be able to optimize your game when you do physics. But it's all about the art of, doing the right thing with that physics so it actually looks good, the overall experience, not just physically interact correctly. And, hopefully in 7 years from now, that's where augmented reality technology is going to be, where you don't think about the technology anymore. You just know that it takes 30% of your CPU, and now you need to, to get it to work nicely, and the context and everything makes sense. But right now, we're just in the middle of that process. We're just in that, in that period of time where the physics doesn't really work very well. The hardware is almost there, so registration software is okay. Hardware, it's okay, it's doable. So we're really at that stage where you need to look on the definition of augmented reality as the technology and art of merging the real and the virtual in real time. And when I'm saying that, I mean that in my office back in New York now, there's a computer vision guy sitting there. There's an engineer sitting there. And on the same table, 6 months ago, I put an experienced designer sitting with them on the same table. So these guys now, when they work together, I see that happening. Now I see it starting to happen. Until now, we were kind of, spinning wheels. They are doing the SDK, they are doing the experience. Oh, is it coming back? Okay, so only when you have this synergy between the guys who can make the technology almost work and work for that specific use case, and there's another guy there who can define that use case very, very, very nicely to work around those limitations, that's where you start to see things happening. Now, I see it on my screen, so.
It'll be back up in about 10 seconds.
In another 10 seconds? Okay. So now, when I think about, when I say it's been a decade of augmented reality, and we're ready for the killer app. What I mean is that augmented reality really started in '65. And I'm sure some of you know about that. That's an experiment done at MIT and by Evan Sutherland. He's known more for digital sketching, but he's also the one who did the first virtual reality and augmented reality demonstration at the same time. They didn't recognize between the two back then. And it was about seeing, he realized that you can think of a 3D wireframe model in front of you as projections of 2D depending on where you're looking on it. That's what the realization that he came up with in his paper, and then he did that huge setup with a room full of computers on top of it with a telescopic arm that comes down, and there were glasses, and you put your hands inside these glasses, and then there's like something that you can, one button that you can move around, and that's how, you know, he envisioned that. But there was like there's a very long story since then to 2003 when the Sony guys, more specifically the Sony guys from London, came up with the PS2 iToy Play. That is the first time someone in the world, a designer and some guys that did also the technology, sat in the same room, and they were thinking, so okay, how am I going to do an augmented, whatever the name was, augmented reality experience that is good for the masses? It just works at your living room. So that's the first time for me when I'm starting to count, there were people, you know, on that globe thinking, I want to do a mass market augmented reality killer game. That's, you know, that's what they set up to do when they started that project in 2003. So, you know, when I say that to some of our game guys, you know, core gamers that have been there and had the device in 2003 at their living room, I didn't. They tell me, yeah, you know, I had that eye thing, and but iToy was not really like a mass market hardware. It was really, you know, not many people bought it. So, well, okay, maybe. So I'll buy that. But 2005, it was, you know, there was an AR tennis game by Hitler New Zealand. Mark Billingham gave a talk previously, and it was, well, it was 10 FPS, so maybe that we don't count that. But then in 2008, the same thing was already running on natural feature tracker. Everything that you see right now from Qualcomm was kind of running, depending on how you do it, but it was running not on the SDK level, but it was running back in the lab in Graz. So, you know, regardless of how you're counting this, it's been a while. And we can keep, you know, every year come here and talk about the future of AI. Next year it's going to be about SLAM, and the next year it's going to be about whatever. But, you know, with the dual cores, my iPhone 4S here, you know, the world is ready. The hardware is there, the software is there. As long as you have the creative guy, the computer vision guy sitting on the same table, you can make it happen now. And so if you buy into that, and you agree that the world is ready for the killer augmented reality game, when I say the world, I mean the ecosystem, then you know, where is it? And so to me, it all goes back to where I started, and it's kind of a funny start with augmented reality. So there's today on the taxi on the shuttle, whatever, from the hotel to the way here. So there was a guy there. I don't know if he's if I can find him here. And we asked him, oh, hi, how are you? And so, you know, where are you coming from? He said, I'm coming from Australia. And then, so how long have you been in AR? I'm asking him. And he said, oh, no, we just found out about augmented reality 2 weeks ago. And we said, that's cool, we have to go to that conference. So we fly in. And I said, well, you know, and then there was Patrick next to me, and he was saying, well, you know, it's so, I envy you, in a sense. And he said, well, he says, why? And Patrick says, well, you know, you're just now starting to realize, you know, the potential in that field, and you just see all the, you know, all the great things, and you're just starting your journey, right? So the beginning of the journey is really great, and as you've been in that journey 7 years waiting for the augmented reality killer experience to come, well, you know, you get into the sense of urgency, so it's becoming more of a mission. But my journey starts in New Zealand. I was just after my wedding. I was traveling with my wife, backpacking in Australia and New Zealand. And then, I don't know if you know, but in New Zealand, there's more ships than people. So the ratio right now is 1 to 10. 10 years ago, it was 1 to 20. You know, the people are going faster. But, or the ships are going down, whatever. But But there's not so many people around you, and everywhere we went, we've been talking with people, socializing. We're backpackers. That's great. And they asked me, so what do you do after the trip? And I said, well, I'm going back to Israel, and I'm going to do a PhD in computer science. And they said, oh, computer science. Well, have you been at the Heat Lab New Zealand or Weta Studios? And that's practically the two places where you say computer science and Heat Lab. They'll direct you at least 2005. They'll immediately point you, to those two places. So I said, Heat Lab New Zealand? No, I haven't heard about Heat Lab New Zealand. I said, yeah, I have to go to the Heat Lab New Zealand. If you're in computer science, you have to go to the Heat Lab New Zealand. This is a great place. So, we jumped into the car and raced into the lab, in a sense. So, I made a phone call to the lab and got Mark on the phone, and he's the, I don't know if you've been in this presentation before, but he's the, probably the nicest guy on earth. So here I am, a backpacker, is about to start his PhD, calling him, and I'm telling him, look, I'm backpacking here around, and I thought I would jump and visit the lab. And he says, great, you're welcome, I'll meet you there. So we were driving there, and since then we've been working as our group in Israel, and then in Ogmento, we've been working with Mark Billenhurst. This is where he came to visit us in Israel. We went to Petra, we did some camel trip, that was fun. And I'll go back to that, but he practically told us or taught me a couple of things that I want to share with you here today, and that all relates to the second part of the presentation. But I was also very thorough, and I said, I'm just starting my PhD, so I'm going to visit Graz, where they're definitely ahead when it comes to augmented reality, and I'm going to see what's going on in the bigger lab. And so Daniel Wagner, the guy behind the Qualcomm technology, in a sense, came to, received us, me and my partner Nate. We went to visit him, and he was very generous. He spent a couple of hours with us, took us through a visit to the different students in the lab. We've seen the different projects. And for someone who is studying in that field, well, I read all the papers, etc., but I haven't seen like real stuff working. So for me, that was like the first time I see the real things running, and it was clear, at least from the perspective of Graz, and then eventually from the perspective of all of us, is that mobile is the future. So they've been doing 30 FPS tracking on mobile before anyone else, and that was amazing to see. That was really amazing to see, because if you have a little bit sense of business, then you understand that, okay, so this is where the future is. And that all brings back the discussion to where I started it, which is, so this future for me, right? This future from 2008 is now, because what do you want? There's a dual core. You can run your graphics on one, the computer vision on the other, whatever you want to do. It's all there for you. There's whatever was available in 2008 on my desktop computer is now even more so available on my phone. It's even stronger than my laptop back then. So we're ready, and we've been ready for a while. So back to the question, where is the killer augmented reality application? And I think I've got some sense of understanding of why we don't see it today, and I hope that that I can share that with you, and you can maybe build on that when you think about your application. So first of all, going back to Mark, one thing that he told us is that tangible user interaction is extremely important. And that really gives, when you can move something, your hand, a marker, whatever, you can move something, even the phone itself, if you can move things, and physical things, and these things are going to move, to interact with the virtual content, then you get to feel that you're really doing something in that experience. The experience becomes much, much better. There's an example from last year, a Qualcomm game, where actually it's being released right now. I think yesterday it was released by the guys in Atlanta, by the group from Blair McIntyre. So the game is Nerd something, and called Nerd something, and you need to, there's a nerd on this marker, and you need to move the nerd by pushing him, with the phone. That's good, that's really showing a tangible user interaction. Going back to, to the roots, then, this is one of the best demos. I don't know if you know it, but this is kind of one of the best demonstrations for tangible user interaction coming from the Heat Lab. I think it was back in 2003 or so. Don't catch me on the date. Let's see if the internet's working. If not, then no videos for you today. Well, it's connected to my phone, so it should be good. Okay. Okay, I will skip the internet. Well, oh, great. So that's that inverse kinematics as you move the marker, the guy is moving around. That's simple things, very, very important. Maybe more important is content assimilation. Very little emphasis is being done nowadays with the experiences I'm seeing out there about that. So, obviously there's in the exhibition room, I just saw, some good experiences, but in general, the ones that are released to the market, there's usually you see there's a general thematic correlation between the content and what it's being played of, but it's not really strong. The content doesn't really strongly align or strongly matches the background, if you want. And this is again an example from the medical, coming from Technical University of Munich. But I like this example because when the first time I saw it, it's a video, by the way, you can look for it online. It's exactly what you would expect to see in that specific place, and it looks so natural. So to me, that's where the content assimilates really, really nicely with the environment. And it has nothing to do with the registration, it has nothing to do with the tracking. Well, it does, kind of, but just the design of that and the way, the redness that they've put there or whatever, just makes it look natural in that environment. There's more aspects to content assimilation which are more coming from technology. So this is Karman virtual model augmented on some blurry image, which is, by the way, how your frames on iPhone are looking 95% of the time. They look kind of blurry like that, and this is how you would usually augment virtual content on top of it. But in fact, what you want to do is more like the upper image, where it's a little bit blurry, just like the background. So this is a most honorable paper from George Klein in ISMA 2009, I think. And that's, they took kind of a deep approach to that, but there's simple tricks you can do with a simple shader or whatever to create this type of little things that make it actually look so much better. And these are very important for a good experience. And there's a more deeper approach that was taken more of the PhD that I did with Nate Hatchby as well as a collaborator here. So this thread of work is about taking one step back and saying, what if the content is not predefined? What if the content is actually taken from the real world? And so by the way we construct the virtual, it's already ready, it's already matching the background. Because we take it from the background and we put it back. So it's a long story. I won't take you long. I won't take you into all of it. But practically, you can imagine a race game played on a sketch. And so as you build a road, one of the frames with a road. When you build a road on top of that sketch, then it already fits to it because it just came from it. So I'll take you through more elements of that recipe, in a sense, of what makes a good augmented reality experience, and lighting is one of those. So this is kind of the extreme of what you can do if you have good lighting. This virtual sofa is it's coming from VTT, and they've in this research they've been assessing the lighting in the room and applying it on the virtual models. So you can see the difference before and after. And that's really cool. You can't really do that on an iPhone, but you can do other tricks that will make lighting seem as if it's real and natural, and that's very important to making a good augmented reality experience. Physical interaction is another one of those components that has to be there to make a good augmented reality experience. So that's a project from Ogmento, and you can see that feel of the ring going on the bottle or swinging back from the bottle makes it, that makes it good, because the virtual interacts with that real bottle there. So that makes a difference. The same project, by the way, also told me that occlusion is very important because, well, when I was building that project with the team, you know, this is how you would imagine it should look, but then when it didn't, then it really, really breaks everything. So occlusion is really important, and it's very difficult to do occlusion of physical objects on the virtual, but it's easy to do virtual on the physical, and the trick is to emphasize that part in your design. If the virtual is really hiding the physical in the right way, then you're probably on a better path to a good augmented reality experience. But maybe the most important part is having minimal assumptions. And that's where that took us to NBA King of the Court, based on I want it to work everywhere. I want someone to be able to take the phone out and it just works. That's what took us into that design of NBA King of the Court, when you see virtual courts augmented on the real world. And what I want to emphasize about this work is I want to put it in the context. And now this is kind of getting to the last 2 minutes of my presentation, and that's really where the meat is. So if you lost me until now, don't worry, that's fine. Now we're getting into the real stuff. So if you take everything I said before, the different elements that needs to be there, and you try to put them into a context, one of them is I want to reach mass market. And then turns out that the less you assume about the environment, then the higher the chances that everybody can just use it anywhere. And with NBA King of the Court, we just assume that you have sensors on your phone. We didn't even use computer vision, because that opens up a whole new set of challenges for the user. So it should work everywhere, and that's where you got into overlay AR. This is where 95% of the augmented reality experiences today are. You just see overlay of graphics on the background of a camera, of a video in the back. Now, if you move more toward the, I'm ready to assume that there's a battle, it's a Dos Equis battle, its color is green. Now you give the designer tools to actually make a good experience. There's occlusion, there's all this kind of stuff. But now you're also moving into the space of products. Can you run the Dos Equis experience? It's on the iPhone, it's on the App Store. Can you run it now? No. Why? You don't have the battle. So it's not really mass market anymore. And going back to a level-headed, the game that Mark demonstrated today, we've printed, you needed to print the markers and put it on the cube, etc., or you need to go to Toys R Us and buy it or whatever. Again, this is not really getting into this digital mass market that we are looking at. So assuming the assumptions that you're doing about the environment are really core, and if you try to put it in the context of what happened to the content assimilation given on the same axis of the assumption of the environment, then you realize that you practically lost the ability to assimilate the content with the background when you assume nothing about the background. When there's no computer vision, where you can work just everywhere, floating around us, then there's nothing you can do as a designer to work with that background, or almost nothing. But when there is pre-known knowledge about the background, then you can do much more. And so all that leads me to this observation that I'll read it to you slowly. Eventually, you understand that this is really stating the obvious. The more the environment can be defined in advance, it is easier the easier it becomes to design virtual content that blends well with that environment. In other words, if I know where it's going to work, like Amir is doing in his art, there's a predefined setup, then you can do nice butterflies on that setup. If you do not know when it's going to work, you want it to work everywhere so everybody can use it, so it's a mass market application, then the challenge becomes really serious. And even more so if you're trying to do rich content. So in the game from the Sony guys yesterday on stage, I personally liked more the game where where there was not the futuristic game, but more of the line game. Who liked more the line, just basic line game, as opposed to the futuristic one? I like more the first one. And the reason is because the stage is raw, there's nothing there, it's not like Star Trek on the stage, so you want to see the simple stuff which aligns nicely with that stage. But if you think about, it's the same experience in a museum where there's like a lot of futuristic stuff around you, then you want to see the second game where it's more the futuristic stuff. So if you want to do a rich experience, then it even becomes harder to blend it nicely with the environment. And the challenge is how to create rich content, because that's what we really want to do, that mixes nicely with any environment around you without knowing that environment. And I think it all boils down to having, you need to do some minimal assumptions. If you're willing to do some minimal assumptions, then you can use those assumptions to try and take to the extreme all those elements I've been trying to explain to you guys. Lighting and tangible interaction occlusion, you probably know all that, but the point is, if you're willing to assume that it's going to work on red, what can you do with red to make the experience more suitable for that red thing? And that is, to me, the key of balancing between mass market with something that works everywhere, every red, and here's a red thing, I can get it to work right there. But it also, because I know it's red, because it's supposed to work only on red, then it looks so much good, so much better for that red. So yesterday on stage, I did a demonstration of this slime tank, and there's some of the elements that are demonstrated with that experience we developed. So for instance, it works everywhere. It worked on the stage yesterday without any pre-training. There's physical interaction as I was moving. There's a tangible interaction. While I was moving, the tank was pointing on me, kind of giving the feeling that it knows where I am in the space. I'm interacting with it. There was physical interaction with the environment when it opened a hole in the table of the judges. There's lighting. It's fake. It's a shadow, a fake shadow, pre-baked shadow, but it works well. It shows how simple tricks you can do with lighting, and so on and so forth. So I'm really 5 minutes after my time, but if you can keep in mind those elements, and probably there's other that I missed, then I think you're already halfway in making the killer augmented reality experience, and I hope that you're now more ready for that challenge. And if you are, and you want our help in that, then I'm more than happy to spend cycles on helping you doing that. Thank you.
So I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions, if you have any questions to Oriel. So everybody is prepared to make the next augmented reality killer app?
Killer app.
Yeah.
Next year.
Okay, the challenge is on.
I actually challenged Amir. I said, if you're,